On the surface, Hollywood looks like a magical place where people's dreams of fame and fortune come true. But scratch below the surface and you'll see that things in Hollywood are never as they seem. Because Hollywood's architects of producers and network executives will lie, cheat, and deceive to maintain the perfect veneer. In the 90s and 2000s, the WB network produced hit show after hit show, but over the last 3 decades, the majority of WB shows have been revealed to be absolute nightmares behind the scenes. While countless numbers of these shows had toxic sets, one show stands out among the rest for their behind-the-scenes antics, because the issues between the show's cast are almost just as well known as the show itself. Charmed ran on the WB network for 8 seasons, and even before the show was greenlit, it was making headlines for what was going on behind the camera. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today: the scandals, controversies, and drama of Charmed and its cast. We'll be diving into the complicated legacy and the decades-long drama of Charmed and what really happened when it comes to one of the most well-known celebrity feuds, including how decades later, this feud between Alyssa Milano and Shannon Doherty went on to bring about the destruction of the standards on Grey's Anatomy. The behind-the-scenes story of Charmed could be a TV show in itself, involving cast fights, ultimatums, blackmail, GoFundMes, multiple affairs, lawsuits, Harvey Weinstein, lies, manipulation, the Super Bowl, so much cheating, and so much more. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the complicated world of Charmed. Charmed was created by a woman named Constance M. Berg, and she was actually brought in by Aaron Spelling from Spelling Television to write and develop this show. The WB, which was a fairly new network at this time, it had only been out for a few years, they had gone to Aaron Spelling and his production company to ask them to make a new show because they previously had made Seventh Heaven 2 years ago in 1996, which at that time was the WB's #1 show. So Charmed was cooked up because the previous year, in 1997, a mid-season replacement named Buffy the Vampire Slayer had gone on to great success. So they wanted to stick in this supernatural genre, but they also decided on the witch element because at that time, the film industry had seen success with witchcraft movies, with 1996's The Craft and 1998's Practical Magic. So the WB, Aaron Spelling, Constance M. Berg, they all, along with the producers from Beverly Hills 90210 that Spelling brought in, all created the show, and the next thing they had to do was cast it. So the casting for Charmed started this whole Charmed being big news about what was going on behind the scenes, because although Charmed is a very successful show that's widely known, one of the most widely known things about it is that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and there has been a lot of issues between certain cast members, and obviously that is what we're going to be talking about today. The show is about 3 sisters who, when their grandmother passed away, find out that not only are they witches with magical powers, but that they are the prophesized charmed ones and the most powerful witches in the world. So in the lead role, they cast Shannon Doherty, who this was big news because she had previously worked with Aaron Spelling on Beverly Hills 90210, but she'd actually been fired from that show due to a lot of issues behind the scenes. So this was a very hot topic that Shannon Doherty and Aaron Spelling were going to reunite and launch a new show. Shannon wanted to bring in Holly Marie Combs, who was a very, very close friend of hers, and she wanted Holly Marie Combs to play the role of Piper, who was the second sister, as Shannon had been cast as the older sister, Prue Halliwell. The network originally didn't want to cast Holly in the role, and they said that she didn't have that star factor, but Spelling and Doherty really wanted Combs in the role, and they were willing to go to bat for her. Shannon actually told the network that she didn't want to do the show without Holly, and the network ended up giving in to Shannon and Aaron Spelling and casting Holly in the role. The third role was initially given to a woman named Dana. I've never been able to get her last name because they only ever refer to her as Dana, but she didn't even make it to the pilot. They got rid of her before they even went into production. And the pilot was shot with Shannon Doherty, Holly Marie Combs, and a woman named Lori Rahm. They ended up putting the pilot forward, they did the presentation, and the WB decided to pick up the pilot and air it in the 1998 fall lineup. But Lori Rahm actually decided that she didn't want to be involved with the show, and she quit the show because she was quite religious and her religion didn't want her to play a witch on TV. And the way that Holly and Shannon found out that she quit was when they were waiting for her to come to an interview and photo shoot with TV Guide. And because Lori quit while they were in the middle of this interview, what they ended up having to do was they took the picture of the three sisters and it was just Shannon and Holly, and then they had to just leave a space and literally just digitally insert Alyssa Milano when they cast her because they didn't even know who was going to play that role at the time. When they cast Alyssa Milano in the role of the third sister, Phoebe, they had to reshoot pretty much the entire pilot, sans a few scenes that were just Piper and her boyfriend. And after they shot the pilot, they started going into production and the pilot aired. It was a great success. They're greenlit for 22 episodes and they shoot the entire first season. Nothing really started to come out during the first season. There was really just the talk about how successful the show was. And then a lot of people, obviously, in the beginning spoke about Spelling and Doherty being together again. And the show was received quite well, even though there wasn't really even anything spoken about bad or difficult that was going on behind the scenes during season one. Apparently, there were issues, despite the fact that many of the actresses have said in interviews that season one, there were no issues. Everyone was getting along and it was fine. But there's been numerous guest stars who were only in the first season that have spoken in interviews over the years about how uncomfortable they were on set due to the tension between the lead actresses. And we will get into what guest stars felt and saw a lot more later in the video. But the first thing to point out here, just while I'm coming up to this first contradiction, is that there are a lot of contradictions in this whole behind the scenes story with Charmed. Obviously, there's always going to be three sides to a story: person A's, person B's, and what actually happened. But there is really contradicting info, and also even just things that people have said happened in 1999, they'll tell the same story in 2024, but it's very different. So there will be contradictions. I'll try and explain any that there's reasoning for, or even why some people might have said certain things like PR and marketing and all of that stuff. But also, I want to just give you all of the information so you can decide what you think happened, because it's a lot. And we will start by going over what we were told at this time when the show was airing, and then we'll go into what has come out over the past 20 years, particularly in the last year or so, because all of the actresses do a lot of podcasts and interviews, and they all go to conventions. So there's people asking them constantly about things that were going on in the set and with the show, and we will go over all of it. So when the show went back for the second season, most of the actresses agree that this is when things really started to get tense and there started to be pretty significant issues. And one other little thing to mention is, obviously this is 25 years ago, social media didn't exist, and the internet wasn't what it is now. It was pretty much message boards, and you would hear little rumblings of things, but for the most part, they were able to really tightly control a lot of this stuff because you only got a few interviews a couple of times a year, beginning of the season, end of the season, maybe one of the big episodes, and that was kind of it.
The highest rating for a WB premiere, fans started to wonder if the three witches got along off-screen.
Come here, baby. No, April. Hey, come here. This is Holly. You guys are... There you go. I'm not talking anymore. You guys are Holly Marie Combs. And we're best friends.
I knew that they were friends, so I was a little freaked out, but as soon as I got to the set, I was like, this is going to be so much fun.
Well, aren't we glad we know that now?
So it wasn't until things really exploded that all of the information started coming out about what had really been going on behind the scenes. According to Shannen Doherty and Holly Marie Combs, over the second season, tension started to rise on the set, and there was some alleged jealousy from Alyssa Milano towards Shannen Doherty because Shannen was the lead character. Like, yes, all three of them were the leads of the show, but Shannon's name was the one that the show was attached to when they greenlit it, when they were putting it into production. It was Shannen Doherty is attached to this. It's a big deal. She was the most well known because while all three actresses had worked as kids and had all been on successful TV shows, Shannen Doherty also was on Beverly Hills 90210, which was a huge show. She was very, very famous. So of course she's going to be the little bit more of the lead than Holly Marie Combs and Alyssa Milano.
The WB presents Shannen Doherty, Holly Marie Combs, and Alyssa Milano in the series premiere, Charmed.
Allegedly, Alyssa Milano also started to have these issues with things like, oh, Shannen might get an extra cover or an extra interview. And they started to complain about, oh, Shannon's in the middle of pictures. And apparently they just didn't get along also. And there were a lot of, I'm sure, there's problems when you're working 18 hours a day with people and you don't like how they do this or that. So there's probably a million issues, but the bottom line is they did not get along, and their tension on set started to get really difficult for everyone to deal with. By the third season, things were extremely tense. And in just these few short years from the first season to the third, it had gone from Alyssa Milano having Shannen and Holly as bridesmaids in her first wedding to they are not speaking to each other, and there's tension throughout the whole set because it's just nonstop arguing and fighting and everybody just feeling completely uncomfortable. And there's multiple people over the years who have spoken about how uncomfortable they felt on the set of Charmed, even people who were guest stars and even people who were children guest starring on the show.
Was it
You're on Shannon's?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how your experience was on set.
The girls were always fighting.
Okay.
They were always fighting. I was also a kid.
Okay.
I was a child.
How old were you?
I think when I first did it, I was like 9.
Oh, shit.
Oh yeah, and then
Okay.
like
Oh,
stopped
okay.
I mean, I was a
You're-
baby,
you're a little
but
bit,
I
yeah.
knew that these women were always fighting.
They fighting in the makeup trailer?
Yes,
Yeah.
in the makeup trailer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wasn't allowed in there because someone was in there, and yeah, it was always fighting.
Oh my God.
Always fighting.
It was not a very fun experience for me on set, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
okay.
But because there was a lot of fighting between the girls, and like I didn't know who to talk to, who to
Yes,
pick, you know?
yeah.
It's like if I pick Shannon, then Holly's going to be mean, and then if I
Yeah.
pick Holly, Shannon's going to be mean.
It's so funny
and-
how you like knew.
I remember leaving that show saying, if they offered me $100,000 an episode to be a series regular, I don't know if I would do it.
Yeah.
Because I just felt sick every day.
Yeah.
Don't want to be in that environment.
Yeah.
You know? I think it got I heard it got better when Rose came on the show, but I don't know her either, so I don't know what the situation was. But
During this time, the network had actually hired a mediator to try and solve the issues going on set. But by the end of the 3rd season, things were just untenable. And Alyssa Milano allegedly went to the producers and the network and issued them with an ultimatum. She said allegedly that she was going to sue the show for a hostile work environment, and that she had been documenting all of the issues and every time that she felt uncomfortable on set. And the only way that she wasn't going to go forward with the lawsuit was if they got rid of Shannon Doherty. According to Holly Marie Combs, the producers said that they were backed into a corner with this lawsuit threat, and that's why they decided that they were going to have to fire Shannon. They ended up actually shooting the entire 3rd season, the 3rd season finale, which Shannon Doherty directed, and then they told Shannon that she was fired and she wasn't coming back. So when she directed and acted in the finale, she didn't know that that was going to be the end of the character and the end of her time on Charmed. If you watch this 3rd season finale, you can see how bad things have got on set, because there's this very orchestrated plot to put Alyssa Milano's character Phoebe very far away from Shannon Doherty's character. And through the whole episode, I think maybe they have one scene together. They're kept very, very separate. And put a pin in that, because there's another actor later where when they return to guest star, it's very strategic again that they do not share any scenes with Alyssa Milano, because allegedly that was their stipulation for returning to the show for a special appearance. After they shot the final episode of season 3, Shannon was then told that she would not be coming back to the show and that they were firing her. But according to Shannon and Holly, Shannon's team told her, your career will not survive another firing, especially from another Aaron Spelling show, because of everything that happened with Beverly Hills 90210. And I do think that's right, because everything with Beverly Hills 90210, that followed her for the rest of her career. So her team came up with this whole story where she would say that she wanted to leave the show, she asked to be written out, and that she had become bored and she wanted to do something else. And Shannon herself has pointed out in many interviews that this was kind of ludicrous, because the show was only on its 3rd season. It was extremely successful. She was making good money. Her father was sick at the time and she was paying for his treatment. And also, she was getting to direct, which is something that she really wanted to do. And this is one thing that I will praise the WB and CW for, is that there are a lot of their cast members that have wanted to move from acting into directing. And the WB and CW are good about giving their actors opportunities to do so if they want to direct. And you can even see this still today. There'll be people like Danielle Panabaker, directed a lot of episodes of The Flash. There was James Lafferty on One Tree Hill. And there's also, I can't remember the actor's name right now, but he played Efren Brown on Evergreen. And that was a show actually that Chris Pratt was on. And when that show was on the WB, he was an actor. And then he actually moved into directing, and he's directed a ton of CW and WB episodes of many, many shows. So there is this kind of opportunity that Shannon wanted to do, that she was being given on the show, which is just another reason to say, why would she leave? So they end up putting out this narrative, and even back when this happened, a lot of people were speaking, even on like message boards and online, about how it didn't quite add up that she would just leave the show.
Now, rumors of bad blood swirled between Shannon Doherty and Alyssa Milano, leading to Shannon's exit. Yes, I'm the devil, sweetie.
Oh, you're the devil.
That is what Shannon Doherty jokingly told Tony Potts about her unceremonious departure last season from the WB hit Charmed. But it was no laughing matter when press accounts reported that Shannon was at odds with both the show's producers and co-star Alyssa Milano.
When you're working that constantly with someone, you're not always going to get along.
Holly Marie Combs, who is good friends with Shannon, was visibly uncomfortable discussing the issue.
For me, personally, yeah. I was a little disappointed, but the show goes on. She's my friend, and I worked with her for a very long time, and I was very comfortable working with her.
And what about reports of Alyssa demanding Shannon's departure, or she would walk?
If I had that kind of power, I'd be, I don't know what I'd be doing, but no,
I don't have that kind of pull.
I also, over the years, have heard from people who were involved with the show, some people that worked on the show or were on the show, and nearly all of them have said that they do believe that it was firing as well, that it wasn't Shannon leaving. So after Shannon was fired from the show, they had a bit of a predicament, because the whole point of Charmed is that there's 3 sisters that are the power of 3 and the 3 charmed ones. And when one sister's gone, what happens? So they didn't really have much choice about what they could do. They either had to finish the show, or they had to, which isn't an option because it was making so much money, and that's the whole reason they had to keep it going and fire Shannon, because it was such a successful show. The other options were either they recast Shannon's character Prue, which it's a supernatural show, so you could come up with some convoluted reason why she looks different, or you bring in the old long lost sister trope, which is exactly what they did. And I will say, considering the situation they were in, they did a pretty good job, and they cast Rose McGowan in the role of Paige Matthews, and in the 4th season premiere, they end up introducing Rose's character, and she becomes the 3rd charmed one, and they're reconstituted. So Rose being brought into the show and them kind of doing like a very soft reboot, that went down fine. But pretty much the rest of the show, Charmed very much falls off a cliff. It turns into a completely different show. And Shannon, again, was someone that was very dedicated to her work, very passionate about the show. And I'm sure her leaving did affect a lot of this stuff. But I think it's more the repercussions of her leaving, some of the things that they ended up doing, which I'll get into in a second. But there also was other people that left when Shannon did, or within like a year of Shannon leaving. One of which, the most important person and the reason that Charm did move in such a different direction after this departure, was when the creator, writer, executive producer, Constance Berg, left the show. She actually stepped down from her executive producer and writing and like being there involved on set role. She stepped down that 3rd season, Shannon's last year, because there was this kind of push and pull between her and producer Brad Kern, who went on to be the showrunner. They had a very different goal for Charmed. Constance Berg wanted to make it about the sisters and them to be the driving point and to be about their relationship and about them as characters. And Brad Kern wanted it to be more about love interests and what skimpy outfits he could get the actresses into. And there's also alleged sexual harassment all wrapped up in that too. So that might be a topic for another day. I need to do a video on like all of the WB showrunners and producers that have had alleged sexual harassment. We'd probably be here for hours because there's so many. I've talked about them, some of them in my WB video, which I'll link above, and my One Tree Hill video that goes over a awful showrunner too. But when they were kind of having this push and pull, Constance and Brad Kern, Constance ended up stepping back in the third season because Brad Kern brought in the character of Cole, which was played by Julian McMahon, who was the love interest of Alyssa Milano's character. And this is also something that caused a lot of tension, was Alyssa Milano's character was with Julian McMahon, but in real life, he was dating Shannon Doherty, and Alyssa Milano was dating Brian Krause, who in the show was dating Holly Marie Combs. So as Holly Marie Combs says in an interview, there was a lot of DNA swapping on the set.
There were times when like people were dating other people's husbands from the show. So it's like, okay, this is my person that he's actually going home with another person. And so like he'd show up in the morning and we have to do like a makeout scene and I'd be like, dude, way too much DNA being transferred here. Go get the Listerine. Don't come out of the makeup trailer until you have the Listerine. And then if you could shower in your trailer, then I'll meet you on set. This happened with 2 on-set relationships that became off-set relationships with somebody else. So, I mean, just way too much DNA swapping.
One thing I want to mention here that it's not evidence. It's not something that you can point and say, oh, that is exactly what happened. But this is just something that I noticed and I find it interesting. As anyone who watches my channel knows, I do a lot of like deep dive research for these videos, and it's been really interesting to do it for Charmed because I did love Charmed, especially the first 3.5 seasons. As I said, it kind of deteriorated after that, but I really, really liked the show. Piper was always my favorite, although I did really like Prue too. And Phoebe got ruined for me the second half of the show because I just couldn't deal with her past season 4. And any Charmed fans watching this, just know that I liked this show so much in the beginning that I literally bought VHSs off eBay that someone else had made recording off the TV, because at this time you couldn't even buy Charmed VHSs, DVDs. There was no streaming, and this was before it was in syndication, so you literally couldn't watch it anywhere. So this sort of research things, yes, I find lots of information and stuff, but some of the stuff for Charmed, it's literally because I've seen the episodes so many times that I'm able to go back and remember certain points. And this thing that I'm going to discuss is one of those moments. I had it yesterday and I was like, oh, maybe they were talking about this, because I listened to all of the episodes of House of Halliwell, which is a podcast that Holly Marie Combs, Brian Krause, and Drew Fuller, who played Chris Halliwell, the son of Piper and Leo, and Brian Krause played Leo, as I just said, Piper's love interest. So they started this podcast a few years ago. I can't remember exactly. And then they stopped it about a year ago because they were getting a whole deal together through iHeartRadio. And it was actually Shannon who got this deal for them. And so they relaunched the podcast from the beginning a couple of weeks ago, and they brought Shannon in as another host, and they were able to record 6 episodes. And then, as I'm sure most people watching this video knows, Shannon sadly passed away just a couple of weeks ago in July. So they're releasing the episodes that she recorded over the next couple of weeks. I think it's on the 3rd episode now. And you can really tell how passionate about the show Shannon is and how much she loves it. They really, really need to get a better editor on that show and get Holly Marie Combs a better microphone.
Apparently they wear the same pants. No, she took a hoodie too. And I don't even think he washed them, and that's fine.
So they smell like me. You're not supposed to wash jeans. Everyone knows that.
Really?
Yeah,
Guys,
you're just not supposed to dry
watch
them.
Because I just can't believe they put shows like this out thinking about how many people are involved in it and how much money. It's just wild to me. They don't have like better mics and editors, but anyway, that's a topic for another day. Hi guys, Editing Ash here. I'm really hoping that this video is going to be up in a few hours. It's like late afternoon on the 14th of August, but I'm just checking it and I wanted to clarify what I just said, because I am in no way saying that mic comment like, oh, they need to get better mics in regards to the cast. They have this podcast being produced by iHeartRadio. Their talent, they just show up and do their job and they're gone. It's iHeartRadio that is the people producing it and editing it and everything like that. This whole thing is in the same vein as like what I think about sponsorships and why I don't do them on my channel, because it all goes back to like having respect for your audience and the people that are giving their time and effort to watch your content. I'll use myself as an example just to kind of explain what I mean, because I'm jumping around all over the place. But when I say that they should have better equipment, they should be editing the podcast better, because it's obvious that they're just recording this podcast, iHeartRadio is, on like a Zoom or something, because they don't even have them recording their own audio and editing it properly that way, because it's all overlapping and the sound quality is terrible. If you are a very small podcast, or you're starting out, or you're someone that wants to get into this thing, in no way am I saying that you need to go and buy, like a Shure mic. Like this microphone, the mic, the stand, the wires, the interface, like everything together, it's like $500-$600. There's no way that anyone who's starting should be going out and spending like tons of money if they don't want to. I mean, of course you always can. But when I had my original channel and I started it, and even at the start of this channel, I literally had like a 5-year-old laptop, an old iPhone, and I bought a shitty mic from Amazon that was like $20-$30, because I was starting and I didn't know anything yet and I wasn't making any money. But when you do start to get viewers or listeners, and especially the last year that I have been so lucky, and all these wonderful people are coming and watching my videos, I'm not gonna still have like a shitty $25 mic, because I am making money from those videos, and you should reinvest some of that into the production to make it better for the audience, for those people listening and watching. I'm not saying go out and spend every penny, like this is a job, and some people like that's their entire job. I think you should find that balance of trying to improve. It's the same way that you try and improve, or I'm trying to improve every video with like the scripting, the editing, how it is. And you should be reinvesting in your audience who are giving you their time, and their viewership is what is allowing you to do all of this stuff. And as I constantly say, I am absolutely like living my dream, and it's only because of people like you. So I think the least I could do is have a decent mic. And like, do I know everything? Is my sound amazing? No, it's absolutely not. Again, it is me and my producer over here. So it's never going to be, like the quality of Office Ladies quality podcast or something, but I'm just constantly trying to improve and hope that people still want to come back. So saying that, I always forget to put this in the video because I'm just so focused on what the video is about. But if you like what you see, consider subscribing, but no pressure, obviously. So anyway, I'm going to go now, but I just wanted to clarify that. So sorry, I've just gone off on a big tangent, but if you've been on the channel before, that's nothing new. So when they're putting these episodes out, the one I listened to the other day, they're talking about the sort of etiquette between on-screen kissing and what you do and what you don't do. And they were talking about how it's really poor form to use your tongue to kiss someone because it's acting, and you shouldn't be doing that, especially without talking to the person before. And that is like a big no-no, like to do that sort of thing. And they were talking about it for a few minutes, and they were both, Holly and Shannon, like giving examples of when it happened to them before. And Shannon said when it happened to her, she asked them like several times, like, don't do this. And they had to like get the director to intervene, and it wasn't for Charmed, it was for another show. And then they were like alluding to a few things. And when I was pulling clips for this video, I came across there are a few scenes with Alyssa Milano and Julian McMahon, who played Cole. And I mean, you literally, I feel a bit weird like describing it this way, but you can literally see Alyssa Milano like putting her tongue in Julian McMahon's mouth. And I mean, I've been in a couple of like small movies and stuff. Shout out for my Patreon if you want to know more about the best and worst celebrities I've met and the best and worst movie set experiences I've had. I've never had any on screen sort of thing like that, but I've been on lots of sets and I've been around lots of actors and lots of people that work in this sort of production, everything like that. I know that's a no-no. Alyssa Milano's worked since she's a child. She knows this. And if you go to any other kissing scene, I mean, obviously I've probably missed some. I can't remember 8 seasons worth, but she doesn't do that with any other person she's kissing. It's only Julian McMahon, only Shannon Doherty's boyfriend. So that was just, I mean, it could mean nothing, but it just struck me as odd.
I am so happy with him. He is so delicious. The women are going to freak out because he's playing the part so well. He's doing like this. There's something very sort of brooding and sexy about him, but also really funny and quirky. And his body is like, just like, please. I'm sweating just talking about it.
And always how when Julian and Alyssa have a scene together, because she sort of comes in like an even better mood and sort of runs around the set going like, I get to kiss Julian. We're like, okay.
There's my man now. You can come in if you want. I'll introduce you to everyone. This is my Julian McMahon. You had to hear me talking about you before I started sweating.
Oh, really?
Okay, don't get too close to me and don't touch me. Just stand over there and don't look at me either.
Also, as I said at the time, Alyssa Milano was dating Brian Krause. And last year, Holly Marie Combs actually did an interview with Shannon Doherty on her podcast, Let Me Be Clear. And Holly spoke about the fact that when she and Brian they do a lot of conventions together, and she spoke about one that they did in Paris, and they were kind of talking about the on-set tensions and stuff a little bit. And he apparently apologized to her for everything that went down on the set and how she was kind of put in this awkward position. Because when Shannon Doherty was fired from the show, Holly Marie Combs went to the producers and the network and said that she was done, that she didn't want to do the show anymore, and she didn't want to do it without Shannon. And the producers and the network knew that they could not lose another cast member. I mean, you lose one, you can bring in a long lost sister and you can, put out some narrative that they've left because they, want to move on or whatever. But you lose 2 and there's already rumblings of like on-set issues and tension. It's going to be a PR disaster. And also, how are you going to fill 2 roles? Like, it would just be an absolute nightmare if that happened. So they knew that they couldn't lose Holly as well. And this is not me using this word. Holly Marie Combs says she was blackmailed to stay on the show because they said to her, if you leave, we will come after you and garnish your wages. If you get another acting job, we'll garnish your wages. If you go and bag groceries in Target in Tampa, we're going to garnish your wages. So she didn't really have much of a choice and she had to stay on the show. And again, this is just another little thing that I've noticed. Like, it's not something that there's evidence for, but I think you can kind of see them trying to give her like a little tiny token of thanks for letting us blackmail you and thanks for staying on the show. Because when Shannon left, the credits for Charmed used to be Shannon Doherty in first position, Holly Marie Combs, and Alyssa Milano in last billing. And Alyssa Milano had and Alyssa Milano, which is usually what they give to someone who has like significance in the cast but isn't in that lead role, which usually goes to first billing. And a lot of CW, WB shows, it will be the second most famous person. So you think of like Buffy, obviously Sarah Michelle Gellar is going to be in the first position. And then Anthony Stewart Head, it's a lot of the CW, WB shows, it's like the parent actor. And so in that last billing position for Buffy, you had Anthony Stewart Head as Giles. And with Charmed, when Shannon left, Alyssa Milano was put to first billing, and Holly Marie Combs, they put her in Alyssa's old position, and it would usually say, and Holly Marie Combs, but they ended up giving her a trailer too. So it was, and Holly Marie Combs as Piper. And usually, I know this sounds silly because it's like, oh, like a few, 2 extra words in your character's name. Like, is that really a big deal? But it is one of those things that it matters. I've seen contracts where literally not only is it stipulated that they'll have and or with, but it will be font size and like what style of font, like these things. I mean, a lot of it is ego. And it's why when you see movie posters for like Marvel movies that have huge casts, that you'll see, Robert Downey Jr. in the first position, but then you'll also see someone like Chris Pratt with and or with Chris Pratt. And even like the original Star Wars, they had with, or maybe it was and Alec McGuinness, because he obviously wasn't the lead, but he was a well-known actor. And I do think that was one thing that they tried to sweeten the deal a little bit for Holly Marie Combs. But the significant thing that they did with both Holly and Alyssa that I do think contributed to the kind of downward slide of the show was them being moved into producer positions in the 5th season. And it's quite rare that actresses that are still young and in their first like really big show, that they'd be given producer credits and be given them so early on. Usually it won't be till the 6th season that actors will be given a producer credit. And it's not like a guaranteed thing. Like it's become a little bit more common, but it's really not super common. Also, a lot of other productions, it's many more seasons that they have to put in, because think of like Grey's Anatomy, which we will get into in a second. Ellen Pompeo, she didn't get her producer credit until 12 years into Grey's Anatomy. And a lot of the producer credits, like sometimes they'll be like vanity credits, but they were very involved. And Holly Marie Combs has spoken about how she got super involved and was like watching dailies every day and like asking the editor, like, why did you use this take and not this take? And like really trying to care about the show and like the dialogue and stuff. And once Constance and Berg left and Brad Kern was like running the show, he also was doing things like polishing every script. So even when someone who was a good writer would write the script and put good storylines in and character development, he would like change things and move things around. And so the show just kind of developed into these episodes where like one contradicted an episode from 2 weeks ago, and it was very like convoluted things that they did. And not only were the scripts and the writing taking a downward turn, but they moved into this, the most important thing is dressing the characters up in outfits and turning them into different creatures and things. Because when they had the 5th season premiere, this was the first year that Constance Berg was completely removed from the show. They had Alyssa Milano playing a mermaid, and she basically had like a gold tail and pasties. And they said that they saw this massive increase in male viewers. So from that point onward, they, especially in like premieres and finales, they would have the characters, the 3 sisters, just dress up as like comic book heroes, and they would turn into all these different sort of creatures too. But they had literally episodes where the shot that they would use made no sense to the episode, and it was as if they were putting these shots in purely for the commercials and like promo material, so they could be like, oh look, we have the actresses dressed up in bikinis as Valkyries, come and watch the show. And in a lot of these episodes where they had the actresses dress up, they would have the commercials say a storyline that never even happened in the episode.
Next Sunday on the WB, something naked this way comes.
That's Lady Godiva.
And she needs help from a charmed one.
Oh! Keep your clothes on. This is a family show.
Nick Lachey has never seen anything like this. Phoebe is Lady Godiva. What are you wearing? Charmed, the Bear Witch Project. Next week on the WB's Big Sunday.
So it just seemed completely driven towards the promo material and the commercials, and they didn't really seem to care so much about the substance of the episode. I did find these really good videos. They're a little bit dated now. They're 6 years old, but they're by a woman called Alison Pregler, and she basically goes through each season of Charmed, and she even did some of the comics. And I'm sure some people will be like, oh, it's a little bit nitpicky, but I think the videos really go over a lot of the issues that developed in the later seasons of Charmed with character development and writing. And she goes a lot into the stuff with Phoebe in the later seasons. But it just is one of those things too, when I see Alyssa Milano talking about the show now and really trying to like distance from some of the decisions. I'm sure there are things that they absolutely couldn't control, but they were producers, and especially in the later season, they really did have control. So I'll actually give you an example of how Holly Marie Combs and Alyssa Milano did actually have a decent amount of control and say in what happened with the storylines and what was being done on the show. Because during the 5th season, there was supposed to be this sort of love triangle. So as I mentioned, there was the character of Cole played by Julian McMahon, and he was dating Shannon Doherty in real life, but on the show, he was with Alyssa Milano's character Phoebe. And at the end of the 5th season premiere, he was supposed to kiss Paige Matthews, Rose McGowan's character. And so there was supposed to be a love triangle between Paige, Cole, and Phoebe. But Alyssa Milano and Holly Marie Combs said, no, we don't want to do that. And they completely axed the story. And there's not just examples of them axing storylines, but I really think you can see how this interference is sort of highlighted in the latter seasons of Charmed, because I think the character of Phoebe especially turns into a bit of a caricature. And I don't want to get too much into this, because if you haven't watched Charmed or you haven't watched it in a while, and I know like people, like certain characters and don't, and that, I'm not doing like a TV analysis, but basically if you watch Charmed, in my opinion, you just see Phoebe develop into this character that can do no wrong. And there is scenes built into the show that are just there to talk about how amazing Phoebe is. It's really strange when when I noticed this and I started then looking out for it, it's constant. And there's her whole storyline with working in a newspaper and having a column. And I mean, maybe I just don't know a lot about newspaper columnists, but it's like she's Adele or like Britney Spears. Like she's on billboards and famous, and all these people on the show are just talking about how amazing Phoebe is and how awesome she is. And she has all these rich boyfriends flying around in private jets. It's like some sort of wish fulfillment, but...
The stunningly beautiful Phoebe Halliwell of Ask Phoebe fame. Your column has skyrocketed. All the critics rave about how amazingly insightful your advice is.
I still can't believe she's really gone. She was always so sweet to me.
She always had a smile for everyone.
And she was always there whenever you needed her.
She was amazing, wasn't she?
Hey, look at you. You're lounging around in a tracksuit with a pencil in your hair and glasses, and you're so beautiful. Rose petal lips, slender neck, fiery, passionate eyes. And when she laughs, doesn't that just make you feel like you can fly?
I won't get into that because there's just too much else to talk about with behind the scenes, but I really suggest these videos that, of course, I will link down below in my sources. I always put every single video, interview, article that I use to make the video in the sources. It's a Google link. So after Shannon Doherty left, you would think, oh, everything must be solved then, especially because Alyssa Milano and Holly Marie Combs were given the producer credit, so they had a bit more control, because one thing they talk about in the very early days of Charmed was how little control they had, how they weren't allowed to, even change their hair or anything like that. So they're given more control, they're given more money, and Alyssa Milano was making a lot of money per episode by this stage. She was making $250,000 per episode, so that's like every week, which is about $350,000 in 2024 money. Editing Ash here again, guys, just to say, it was actually Rose McGowan who purported Alyssa Milano made $250,000 an episode. I did see some very old articles, like from when Charmed was actually airing, that around season 4 she was making about $90,000. So that does make sense that as Charmed has gone on and she got the producer credit, $250,000 is probably absolutely true. But whether it is $250,000 for just the acting, whether it's $250,000 for acting and producing, or whether it's a little bit less than that, whatever way you slice it, it's a lot of fucking money. And I just wanted to provide that little bit extra context for the numbers, because now we're going to discuss what they had to sacrifice to keep giving Alyssa Milano this very large figure week after week for each episode. Because also don't forget that Charmed was one of those 90s, 2000s network shows. So it had 22 or 23 episodes every single one of its 8 seasons. She also was given like a budget increase for her wardrobe. She was the one that was given like a lot of designer clothes and stuff. I'm sure like Holly would have been allowed to do that if she wanted to, but she didn't. And Holly has spoken also about how she ended up making like less money because she would never ask for a raise, because they always just had a budget. And so if she got a raise, they would have to take money away from the guest stars and other people on the show. And that's what they actually had to do in the last season. They had to write out Dorian Gregory's character, who was on the show from the beginning, because they couldn't afford to pay his salary anymore. So he was completely not in the last season. They even had to write Brian Krause out of a ton of episodes in the last season because, again, they just couldn't afford to pay for him for every episode. And there was money taken out of special effects budgets, out of guest star budgets, and they also could not go on location for any episodes in the last season, and everything was shot at the Paramount lot. So taking all of that into consideration, Shannon's gone, their producers, they have more control, more money. You'd think everything is great, right? It's Charmed, so no, it was not great. And it wasn't even great for a season. Issues still continued and continued to get worse and worse. There's actually a clip from Armin Shimmerman, who was a guest star in one of the episodes from season 4. And he talks about how his worst experience on a set was when he was on the set of Charmed. And I'll play the clip here because I can't do it justice. He really did not like his time on Charmed.
And what I will put on camera, the worst diva moments I ever had, without a doubt. Two shows, neither Buffy nor Star Trek. I hated the ladies on Bewitched. Charmed. And there's a reason why they were cast as witches. Of all the shows I ever worked, that was by far the ugliest. And I'm not too fond of Seinfeld either.
So even though Shannon left the show, the issues certainly continued. And as I said, he gets started in the 4th season. So this is the season just after Shannon's left. And Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano had issues as well. They weren't really covered when the show was being filmed and coming out, but they have both spoken about issues that they've had, especially Rose McGowan. And there was a lot of back and forth between Alyssa Milano and Rose McGowan over social media in recent years because Rose McGowan was very involved in the Me Too movement because she was sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, and rightfully so. Rose spoke out about him and was a voice in the Me Too movement, and Alyssa Milano ended up getting involved in it as well. That is probably a subject for another video because there's so much information and so much that I'd need to cover to give like the backstory and talk about Me Too and Weinstein. So that is something that I could definitely do for another video if anybody would be interested in talking about Harvey Weinstein and everything that happened there. That might be something that I could cover on Patreon too if like enough people aren't interested here, because it'd probably be easier to talk about on Patreon because you don't have the same like censorship as YouTube. That's why on Patreon I talk about stuff that I would never talk about on here. It's just too much of a nightmare with having to silence or beep every word and, you know, say things like unalive or pass away, and it's just a nightmare, but it's just the way the platform is, unfortunately. Believe me, I wouldn't talk this way if I didn't have to, because unfortunately, if you don't abide by these like little censor rules and things, they won't monetize the video. And while I do still have a real world job because I don't do sponsorships on my channel, I do spend, I don't even want to tell you because it's literally embarrassing how long I spend on these videos. So this is like one of my jobs, but it's not even the fact about the monetization because I've done plenty of videos that I haven't monetized. It's the fact that if the video isn't monetized, it isn't pushed into the algorithm the same way. And if you want to see which videos I didn't monetize, look at the videos that are the lowest views on the channel, because obviously YouTube, when it's going to push 2 videos, even if it's 2 of mine, if one's monetized and one's not, it's going to push the monetized one because YouTube then makes money. So it's one of those like just things that you have to deal with on the platform. And believe me, if I didn't have to censor things, I wouldn't. So the issues continued on Charmed to the very last season. And Charmed had kind of a weird ending because they originally were going to end the show at the 7th season. They even titled the 7th season finale Something Wicked This Way Goes. And the premiere was titled Something Wicked This Way Comes. It really, the whole finale, is a series finale. It's set up as a series finale. It looks like a series finale. And then they decided to do one more season only because of the fact that the WB was going to shut, and then the WB and UPN were going to merge and start the CW. So they wanted to do one more season of Charmed to try and like hang on to some of those Charmed watchers to float them over to the CW. And you can tell that the 8th season was like smashed together because there was still so many issues going on with the cast and on the set that the actresses didn't even want to come back full time. So they originally floated this idea where at the end of the 7th season, there's basically this whole storyline where they blow up the house that they all live in and they like fake their deaths, and they explaining some of this is so convoluted, but they do this like glamour where they look like other people. So when you see them on screen, you see completely different people. And sometimes when they'll like look in the mirror or like they'll, drop the effect, you see them as like the real actresses. So for the final season, the Charmed actresses who were producers floated this idea that instead of them appearing in all of the episodes for the entire of each episode, they would only appear in like 1 or 2 scenes an episode. And it would actually be the actors who were playing like the fake versions of them that would be who was appearing all the time, and that you would only see the real actresses if they were in like a mirror reflection or if they're in the house, like just them all hanging out, because they would drop like the mask and the facade. And they actually ended up shooting the first episode of the 8th season this way. And then when the network saw it, they were like, no, we're not doing this. And they ended up having to reshoot the scenes that they were missing from the first episode and then just carry on as normal. And you can even see by the end of the show how it's really like being held together by a string, because by the last episode, Rose McGowan was already working on the Quentin Tarantino project. So she's barely in the finale, and it's the series finale. It's the last episode of the show. And then Alyssa Milano went on vacation with her family, even though the show that she's the star of and a producer on for 8 years is ending, and then you could go on your vacation then. So Alyssa Milano and Rose McGowan are barely in the finale, and it's kind of all on Holly Marie Combs. And the finale is really pretty much her. And because Rose and Alyssa Milano weren't in it, and they tried to like trim bits of budget from elsewhere, they brought Brian Krause back for the finale, because otherwise it just would have been Holly Marie Combs on her own. So after the show ended, of course, there was chatter about what had gone on behind the scenes. And, you know, there's bits of interviews and things that cast would do that would allude to things. And there was always rumblings and people talking. And as I said, like I heard from many, many, many people about a lot of the issues that were going on. Only recently has the story been reignited again, because of course, like they get asked about it at conventions, and all of the Charmed actors, like pretty much the whole cast, even people like Drew Fuller, who were only in a couple of seasons, they all do conventions, and they're really big guests at conventions because they were on a really popular show for a long time. So they're a staple in the convention community. But it wasn't until last year when Holly Marie Combs came on Shannon Doherty's podcast, Let Me Be Clear, for 2 episodes, and they went over everything about Charmed and Shannon's exit from the show from their point of view. And they told basically what I've said here about Shannon being fired and them orchestrating this whole, oh no, she wanted to leave. And then they went into more details about how uncomfortable it was on set. And of course, as I said, you know, there's always one person's side of the story, the other person's side, and what happened, because they talk in this interview about, oh, everything was great in season 1. And then you have season 1 guest stars who were saying, no, it was awful. You have them also saying in this interview, oh, we didn't argue, like no one knew, it was all just in closed doors and nobody was aware of what was happening. And yet like every single person I've ever known who like stepped foot anywhere near Charmed set was like, it's a nightmare. And also so many people over the years have talked about what was going on over there. And that Armin Shimmerman clip speaks for itself, because I mean, what does he have to gain from saying that if it's not true? He's saying it to a room full of people at a convention, probably not even realizing that he's being filmed. So I just can't imagine that that's something that he would like make up. Like, what is he going to gain from that? So Shannon and Holly do the podcast, and there is a lot of back and forth on social media after this podcast, because Alyssa Milano obviously heard, and then she started speaking on social media, and there was back and forth between them. They're definitely not shy about putting stuff on social media. And then when they went to MegaCon in Orlando, Shannon Doherty, Holly Marie Combs, and Rose McGowan, this is April this year in Orlando that they went there, and they appeared on a panel together. And then Alyssa Milano was also there, but she appeared by herself on a panel. And all of them spoke about this kind of divide. When Shannon, Holly, and Rose were on stage together, they answered questions and were talking to the fans and things. And then at the end, Shannon read like a short statement basically against what Alyssa had said, where she had put out a statement on social media saying, like, why is everyone bringing this up like 25 years later? And while that's a point, like, yeah, it was a long time ago, but also Shannon was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I can understand her wanting to get her side out, especially if all of that is true and she had to go with this story of, oh, you're leaving the show, and her dad was sick at that time, and it did damage her reputation and things too, and she lost out on a lot of money. And the money side is an interesting thing too, because Shannon was on the show for 3 seasons, and she actually recently spoke in like a court case against her ex-husband how Charmed was being taken off a lot of the streaming networks and reruns and things. And she was saying how when that happened, she would be in like a bad spot financially because she couldn't work anymore. So she lost her health insurance through the Screen Actors Guild. And most of the way she was able to pay for her treatment was through Charmed reruns and syndication. But when the show left, like obviously she's not going to get that income anymore. And then you look with Alyssa Milano, one thing that she got a lot of backlash for recently was putting up a GoFundMe for 10 grand for her son's like baseball tournament. And you have to think Shannon Doherty was on that show for 3 seasons, and that was like the bulk of the income she was making was just from the syndication. Alyssa Milano was on the show for 8 years, and she was a producer, and those producers make good money. She also got a significant raise. So with that raise, she will have been getting a bigger cut for the reruns. And she was on the show for nearly 3 times the amount Shannon was, and she had the producer credit. So I would even like guesstimate that she was probably making 10, 15 times more than whatever Shannon was getting from reruns. And you're putting up a GoFundMe for 10 grand. Like that really rubbed me the wrong way when I saw that. And I know I shouldn't editorialize too much, but that I know a lot of people had issues with the baseball thing, especially because a few weeks after she put the GoFundMe up, she went to the Super Bowl where, I mean, everybody knows the Super Bowl tickets are super expensive. And it's just, I don't know. I don't think it's a good look when you are a super mega rich actress and you're married to an uber rich agent who worked at CAA. And there's a whole thing with CAA too, because Rose McGowan has spoken about Alyssa Milano's husband being a CAA agent because that was the agency that Harvey Weinstein was involved with. So that's something else I could talk about in the potential Harvey Weinstein video. But that is something that really rubbed people the wrong way because, I mean, have you seen the world? Like the world's on fire and everybody is struggling and it's a nightmare trying to get by. And yet you're asking for 10 grand for like a baseball thing for your son. I mean, I can understand why people got really angry and she got a lot of backlash. So after Rose, Holly, and Shannon did their panel and Q&A, the next day at MegaCon, Alyssa Milano did her panel and Q&A, and she did discuss the topic and kind of reiterated what she said on social media. A lot of, I want to just move on from this. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I just want, you know, the fans to enjoy the show, and we're not the best of friends. Okay, let's kind of move on. So after MegaCon, there was a lot of discussion on social media, and it was a lot of, well, with all this information, like, who do you believe or what do you think really went on? And I think most people have come to the conclusion that even the actresses don't even seem to know what went on. It just seemed to be an absolute nightmare. And even Holly Marie Combs has said, we were all nightmares. We could have all been better. We all did things we shouldn't have done, which I think is valid. And I do think what Holly said is probably true, that they all were nightmares and all contributed to it in some way. I don't think that Shannon should have been let go, because again, it's like taking away someone's livelihood, and that did really damage her career. But obviously I don't know if there was something like really bad that was done, but I will say from my experience on sets, this doesn't surprise me one bit. There are a lot of very difficult people that are actors and actresses, and you would be really surprised because even sets that I've been on recently, the L Word Generation Q, for example, there's people that I will always praise. Rosie O'Donnell, Laurel Holloman were absolutely amazing to me. And I covered that show on my original channel, and I got to go to the set and like rap parties and everything. And there is a big part of me that wants to do a video like this about the L Word Generation Q, because I think if you really watch and pay attention to my L Word videos, that you could probably figure out who the nightmares are, because I'm very quiet about certain people. And that's because, obviously you don't want to, if me, a normal person, says something bad about a celebrity, most people are going to go against you or say that's not true or attack you or something. So it's just best, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But I would really love to do an L Word video, and because I cannot tell you the things that I know about that set. Oh my God. There's some things that I wouldn't be able to say, but there's a lot of really good stuff. But let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. So after MegaCon, then they decide to relaunch this podcast, The House of Halliwell, and it had been put together by Holly Marie Combs, Drew Fuller, and Brian Krause, and they ended up bringing in Shannon, and she brought it to iHeartRadio, who are the people who put out her podcast. They took a while to get it all sorted and all together, and they have been recording episodes and banking them for a while because, as I said earlier, unfortunately, Shannon passed away just a few weeks ago in July, and they were able to record some episodes in advance with her. And I've obviously been listening to them, and it's really sad when you listen to them because you hear them talking about, like how excited they are to watch the episodes that like Shannon isn't in because she obviously never saw those. And there's a episode that just was released where she's very complimentary of Alyssa Milano and her joining the cast. And ultimately, when I was listening to that episode, I was like, that's really nice that, she's doing this as like one last thing for a show that she loved, that she knows that her fans loved. And she was saying something nice about Alyssa because like maybe they were never going to be the best of friends and they weren't even going to be acquaintances or forgive each other or whatever. But I think they both have just accepted it and moved on. And I am really glad that Shannon was able to do something else charm related before she passed away, because as I've said many times, you can't listen to her talk about the show and not see how she cares about it. And one thing I also will say about Shannon is that I know so many people who have worked with her, met her, been at events with her, and especially people who are like fans of her that have met her have nothing but the nicest things to say about her. And there's a lot of celebrities, especially at these conventions and stuff. I mean, there's some celebrities that literally build walls between them and the fan. And Shannon was extremely immunocompromised. And she was that person who really like not only was paying attention to the fan that was in front of her, but made them feel like they were having like an actual conversation. And even though, again, she was immunocompromised, she was always like hugging them. And just anybody who I know who had anything to do with her, even if it was someone who worked with her for one day or someone who was like a super fan, they all had like really, really nice things to say about her and like their experience with her. one other thing that like I've kind of been like fighting whether I should say this or not, because ultimately it's like editorializing, it's my opinion and it's not really like anything, but there is something that I've been told about an interaction between Shannon, Holly, and someone I know, and it really paints them in a very good light. And the person asked me not to say anything, so I can't. So that is like one other tick that I have in their column. I know that that is like providing you nothing, but there are a lot of things that people tell me, or like things that I've seen on sets, or people that I know, or people that I've worked with. And it's great to people are so open about me sharing stuff and talking about things, but there are a few instances where people have sworn me to secrecy and I can't say anything, but I did want to throw that in anyway, because by this stage in the video, most of the people that are here are the people that are pretty, clued in, and also people that are here to see the whole story. So as I said, I know that doesn't give you much, but I wanted to at least give you as much as I can all of the context that I'm working with for what I'm about to say next. The behind the scenes drama on Charmed is messy, convoluted, and complicated, and it spans nearly 3 decades. Ultimately, at this stage, I don't think even the actresses know what happened, and they've all admitted that they weren't perfect and they all could have been better when they were working on the show. When it comes to the actresses specifically, my interpretation of the situation is that these were 3 successful child actors that were in their early 20s and then went onto a show that became wildly successful. I think they all had a hand in the issues, and they all likely were difficult to deal with, because when you're being paid a fortune, have millions of fans, are on a super successful show, it all does go to your head a bit. And I think a lot of the issues with Charmed, it was all to do with everyone's egos. Hi guys, Editing Ash here again, because most of the time I have to jump in and tell you something that I forgot to mention in the video. So here we are again. I forgot to talk about I did talk about Grey's Anatomy, but I forgot to talk about the Grey's Anatomy part that relates to the downfall of Grey's standards that some believe relate to an individual, and that individual kind of got their job and their position at Grey's because of everything that went down on the set of Charmed. So there is a woman named Krista Vernoff who worked on Grey's Anatomy since the beginning. And as most people know, Shonda Rhimes created Grey's Anatomy. She's amazing. She also did Crossroads, the Britney movie. And Shonda was on the show, ran the show, was a showrunner for many, many, many years. And then she has now mainly been on Netflix. She's got a big deal with them. She does Bridgerton, and she kind of handed off the showrunning duties because she started also doing a bunch of other shows like How to Get Away with Murder, which absolutely love that show. Viola Davis is amazing, and Scandal and a bunch of others. So she handed off showrunning to Krista Vernoff, who she had been a writer and she had other positions, like she literally worked her way up on Grey's. And a lot of people have issues with her and the way that the show has gone since she's been in charge. I know like one of my things was I didn't like that at season 14 they just like got rid of Arizona, who's my like favorite character, and April, and just a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of articles and things out there about this, and people talk about it just in general a lot. And Krista Vernoff actually ended up leaving Charmed because of all the issues that were going on. So she was on Charmed from the beginning, and again she had like multiple different titles and moved up, and she ended up leaving after like Shannon and Constance. And there was actually like a big social media hoorah between Kristen and Holly Marie Combs and Alyssa Milano, and I think Rose and Shannon like might have alluded or spoken about it later too, but it was majority Holly and Alyssa, which them being producers and them being on the show the longest, it makes sense because Krista did like an interview where she talked about Charmed and how she didn't like the direction that the show went in pretty much after Constance left, and was talking a lot about, there's like some quote that she said that was basically saying that it was bad what they were putting out, and it was talking about, you know, all of the very skimpy outfits and dressing them up as creatures and just all these revolving door of love interests and like not really any character development and stuff. And obviously Holly and Alyssa like got offended by this, so they really got into a bit of a thing on social media. And I have seen even Holly like make a few little like comments even recently, like someone will say something and she will be like, oh, well, Charmed was just bad for the world or something. And it was just, the Charmed cast get into a lot of social media issues and fights and stuff. They're definitely not shy about it. But anyway, that was just a very sidetracked all over the show explanation of the fact that it was a little bit of a ripple effect of the Shannon stuff happened. They pushed Constance out of the show. Krista was like, oh, I don't want to be on this production that's being led by Brad Kern, who is doing the turning them into creatures for the skimpy outfits and love interests. And then she was hired on Grey's Anatomy in 2005. I think she left Charmed. It was either 2003 or 2004. There's like different reports saying different things. And then some, like IMDb says one thing and Wikipedia says another. So it was around that time. And then her next job was Grey's Anatomy. And I'll leave you with this. I know I've mentioned a few other videos I want to do in this video because I have a list a mile long and I just want to keep doing more and more. But I do think about doing a video that's a version of like the behind the TV show stuff about Grey's Anatomy, because that show is absolutely rife with behind the scenes stuff. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. And back to Past Me. Okay, this is a first Editing Ash jumping into an Editing Ash clip because this is much later. It's now past 5 o'clock. And I swear I'm uploading this right now, but I forgot about one interview that I wanted to put in, and it doesn't actually like provide a lot of substance, but it is the most awkward interview I have ever seen. It's so awkward. And if you watch not my last video, the video before about Justin Timberlake, it'll add like a little bit of something extra too. I'm just going to put a little snippet in so you can see the awkwardness in it all its glory, but it's really long. So I'll leave it linked down below with all the sources. And if you want to have a laugh and watch the whole thing, I suggest you do it. Okay, I swear I'm uploading this video now.
Are you open to discuss your personal life, or would you just cover it up?
I talk about anything because I have nothing to hide. I don't think I've ever lied in an interview because I've never done anything to be ashamed of.
Right. Well,
She's
we
like
have some
Jillian.
information here.
I'm very honest and open.
Like Joe, if this were a Howard interview, and I'm not going there, but one of you would be asked about Justin Timberlake, but I'm not going there.
It would be Brian.
Oh, yeah. No, I would not be. But anyway.
I will say one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is something that I found very interesting when I started really looking into everything, because as I said, I watched the show when it first came out. I was 10 years old, I think, when it came out, and I watched it all through my teenage years. But when this all started being reignited after Holly and Shannon did Shannon's podcast, and then with all the convention stuff, and then obviously looking into it a lot more for this video, I have found that pretty much all of at least people that were main cast members have really made it clear that they are Team Shannon. And this is main cast members who worked on the show when Shannon wasn't even on it. So people like Drew Fuller and Rose McGowan is another good example. Like clearly they weren't on the show at the same time, but when it comes to who they're going to conventions with and who they're doing podcasts and interviews with, it is all of these people siding with Shannon. And of course, now Drew Fuller, Brian Krause, and Holly Marie Combs and Shannon Doherty for the beginning are doing the House of Halliwell podcast. As anytime I see Charmed cast doing interviews, podcasts, conventions is a really big one, because these CWWB cast members kind of have a second life with conventions after their show, and there's usually a couple of years in between, and the Charmed cast really do a lot of conventions. But as I said, it's a little club with Shannon, Holly, Rose, Brian Krause, Drew Fuller, and a lot of the other actors who appeared on the show. A lot of people, when they're talking about the Charmed behind the scenes drama, they really just focus on Shannon versus Alyssa and the things that have gone on between them. But it really seems, especially after looking into everything for this video, that the entire set was toxic, because there's just so many people that have spoken out in one way or another, be it podcasts like the clips I played you of people, that were in 1, 2, a couple of episodes. And one of the people that I played the clip for in the beginning, she was in the 7th episode ever. So there was issues even then. There's also how Constance Berg, the show creator, was treated and pushed out of the show. Brad Kern then became the showrunner, and he actually ended up writing Shannon an apology letter years and years later over everything that went on the set. And it wasn't just Shannon and Alyssa that they had to keep separate. There were seemingly other cast members who refused to work together. Like when Julian McMahon returned for the 100th episode, according to some people I spoke with who have ties to the show, Julian made a stipulation that he would only return for the 100th episode if he did not have to work with Alyssa. His entire storyline is with Holly Marie Combs' character Piper, which if you've watched the show, you would know that's kind of a strange storyline for the character of Cole to do when he's coming back for a big episode like the 100th episode, because his character was a love interest for Phoebe. And so it was strange that he didn't come back to have any scenes with Phoebe, Alyssa Milano at all, because even the way that they shot the episode, there's a scene where it's Cole, Julian McMahon, Piper, Holly Marie Combs, and they're kind of in this different plane of existence. I know explaining it sometimes is a bit strange, but they're supposed to be kind of in the same room as Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano's character, but they can't see Julian and Holly. And the way that you usually shoot scenes like this, you'll do the group shot and then you'll shoot it if two people are talking. You shoot it like I am now with a camera pointed towards me, and you might have, say I'm speaking to Piper, you would have Holly Marie Combs or a stand-in stand very close to the camera with the back of their head, basically as if a normal conversation's going on. And then you switch the camera, and the way that they shot this scene, it's actually, they've shot like the group part, but they pull in really tight so that when it's with the camera pointing this way, they basically just have it tight on Piper and Julian McMahon's characters here. And they've obviously done this so that they can film this scene in 2 separate parts with only Holly in the foreground and Julian not having to interact in any way with Alyssa. And I know at the time they tried to say there was some sort of scheduling thing, but Julian shares a scene with Billy Zane, who's like the other person who is a guest star that you would think this only scheduling issues could be with him, and they share a scene at the very end of the 150th episode. Julian's obviously never spoken on this. I have seen one picture of him and Alyssa at a convention a few years ago, but obviously at a convention in front of thousands and thousands of Charmed fans, they're not going to disappoint those people and, ice each other out. So let me know what you think about this odd filming technique, because to me, it does look strange. I know obviously that different angles and things, they're filming at different parts of the day or even different days, but this just really looks odd the way it's been shot, allegedly, in my opinion, based on what I've heard from people who are intimately involved with the show anyway. While the actresses absolutely played their parts in the behind the scenes antics, I do think it equally was the part of the system they were operating in. The show was ran and produced by older men and a network that very tightly controlled everything. And it seems like the network and the producers wanted to pit the actresses against one another. In the beginning, Charmed was a good show, but during the midpoint of the 4th season, it fell off a cliff. Constance Berg, who created the show and wanted the show to be focused around the 3 sisters, was pushed out, and Brad Kern became the showrunner. Kern also had a hand in writing or polishing every episode, and his priority was love interests, Alyssa Milano's character, and dressing the cast up in revealing outfits. If you didn't watch Charmed when it was on the air, this dressing the cast up in outfits got so much backlash. People were so over it because people watched the show in the beginning for the sisters and the storyline, and by the end, it was just, what creature are they going to turn them into this week? And they actually, during the last season, the actresses said, we know people are angry about the outfits. We're not going to turn into anything or dress up this season. So then they brought in another actress who was actually Kaylee Cuoco from The Big Bang Theory, and had this character dress up instead. And anytime they did have to turn into anything, they made it so they brought in other actors to be the things that they turned into. So they couldn't even have one season not turning into things. One other crazy thing about the creatures and revealing outfits is the episode I was speaking about earlier where Alyssa Milano turns into a mermaid. And that was when they really lent into the let's get these revealing outfits on. That episode actually made Brad Kern write a spin-off about mermaids. And it wasn't really a spin-off of Charmed because it just was about mermaids, and it in no way it wasn't like it was the mermaids from Charmed or anything. It didn't tie in at all. It was just mermaids. And thankfully that show was never made, but the only reason it wasn't made was because of the fact the WB was closing and merging with UPN to create the CW. I think the fact that the show lost Constance Berg and Shannon Doherty ultimately hurt it, and it never really recovered because say what you want about Shannon Doherty, but she was very, very passionate about Charmed, and Constance Berg was the creator. And also, you can't say that it had the same level of storytelling and even actual consistency in the later seasons, because the episodes towards the latter couple of seasons are so contradicting. And you would have one episode that 3 episodes later completely changes everything about what characters have said. And even towards the end, it was like the people writing the show hadn't even watched the show. And I'll give you an example, because there was a scene that is later in the show, and Piper is saying to Leo, her husband, oh, my Grams, the first thing that she taught me was about demons. The whole premise of the show is that these 3 sisters come back after their Grams has died, and they find out they are witches, and it's completely unknown. They knew nothing about this. That's the premise of the show. And this is completely contradictory information. Okay, I'll stop talking about the convoluted storytelling. I just really am so disappointed by the last couple of years of the show, especially because the last 2 seasons, it was just recycled plots, recycled storylines, and really bizarre stunt casting. And it's actually quite sad because the show had so much potential, and I really wonder what would have happened if Constance and Shannon stayed on the show. After the actresses playing them became producers, the characters of Piper and Phoebe became caricatures that could do no wrong. And as I said earlier, the character of Phoebe became unwatchable and honestly a parody of earlier seasons of the show. And as I also said earlier, the producer credit was obviously a sweetener or some sort of bargaining chip because it's just so out of the ordinary that actresses would be made producers at the fourth season. That just never happens, especially on the WB, CW. And also the fact that they never made Rose a producer and she was on the show for 5 seasons. People are complicated, and it seems like a lot of egos, not just the actresses, got in the way of what could have been a good show throughout its entire run. I still really enjoy the earlier seasons of the show, especially the fact that in the late 90s, when I was 10, 11 years old, it was unheard of to have 3 female leads in a popular show. I know the actresses are keen to do a reboot, but if that doesn't happen, I hope they have great success with the podcast House of Halliwell. And I'm sure a lot of the OG diehard Charm fans, I don't even know what Charm fans actually are called. So let me know below if there's a name for them. I can't even think of what it would be actually, like Charmers or something. So let me know if there's a name for diehard Charm fans. But I also think that young fans of the show or people that are discovering it now, it's probably really nice to hear a lot of the stuff and context that you would miss if you weren't watching it when it aired. I am so interested to hear what people think because I find anytime I discuss this with people that most people have wildly different takes. And if you want to hear about some more Alyssa Milano drama, then I'll leave my Justin Timberlake video linked above. I wanted a bit of a lighter topic for this video as we just had 3 big mama monster dark deep dive topics, and my next video is going to be a mega deep dive, crazy, some dark stuff too. So I'm really looking forward to getting that video out for you guys. If you haven't got your fill yet of the WB and the CW, I do have a video about a lot of WB shows, Buffy, Smallville, lots more. I do have a One Tree Hill video too, and tons of other shows, Glee, That 70s Show. And if you want more content, you can check out my Patreon. Consider subscribing, but absolutely no pressure. Just thank you for being here. I'll leave my social media and Miss G's linked down below. Thank you so much again. And as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.